I just had the opportunity to have an excellent conversation with President-elect Trump. It was wide-ranging. We talked about some of the organizational issues in setting up a White House. We talked about foreign policy. We talked about domestic policy. And as I said last night, my number one priority in the coming 2 months is to try to facilitate a transition that ensures our president-elect is successful.
And yet, this is this not surreal to see this? Here's more from Obama.
I have been very encouraged by the, I think, interest in President-elect Trump's wanting to work with my team around many of the issues that this great country faces. And I believe that it is important for all of us, regardless of party and regardless of political preferences, to now come together, work together to deal with the many challenges that we face.
And the president said to Donald Trump, I want to help you all I can, because if you succeed, we all succeed. It was very, very heartwarming to see this. And then Donald Trump spoke.
This was a meeting that was going to last for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and we were just going to get to know each other. We had never met each other. I have great respect. The meeting lasted for almost an hour and a half, and it could have, as far as I'm concerned, it could have gone on for a lot longer.
Yeah, Donald Trump was enjoying it and having fun. One more from Donald Trump.
We discussed a lot of different situations, some wonderful and some difficulties. I very much look forward to dealing with the president in the future, including counsel. He explained some of the difficulties, some of the high-flying assets, and some of the really great things that have been achieved. So, Mr. President, it was a great honor being with you, and I look forward to being with you many, many more times in the future. Thank you, sir.
All right, folks, joining me now, Ari Fleischer, former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush and president of Fleischer Sports. Hello, Ari. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Hello to you.
Well, before we get to the election and an op-ed piece that you wrote and who you voted for and didn't vote for president of the United States, boy, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during basically a 90-minute meeting between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. In the end, as we just heard, I played some bites, and you heard that they all said the right things. They talked about domestic and foreign policy, the president wishing Donald Trump all the success in the world because he said if he succeeds, we succeed, and Donald Trump nothing but complimentary. The wives got together. So what else should we know? I mean, do you think it was all rosy, considering the animosity that existed between the two going in?
I do think it was all rosy. Here's what I think happened. If you're President Obama, you realize this is a unique chance to share a lot of details to preserve the programs you want to have preserved. And so he would probably go through that meeting and say, here's what you need to know that campaigns never get to discuss about Obamacare. X, Y, Z. Here's what you need to know about the Iran deal. A, B, C. It wouldn't surprise me if President Obama talked for 75% of the meeting, and he used it as his chance to really dig deep into policies because he wants to preserve those policies and not see them be repealed.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting indeed. I had Jack Abramoff earlier in the day, and he said he wouldn't be surprised if the two talked about going forward the future of prosecuting Hillary Clinton. Would that surprise you?
Oh, I'd be shocked if that came up.
Really?
First of all, it's not a presidential matter. It should never be a presidential matter. That should be an impartial matter for the Department of Justice to deal with. The idea that President Obama would indicate whether or not Hillary should be prosecuted and tell that to Donald Trump, I'd be shocked if that came up in the meeting. I think, frankly, the problem with that type of thinking is it's what we on the conservative side love to think should happen, so we think it happens. I don't think it's realistic.
Do you think, I mean, again, it's speculation, and I don't know how well you know Donald Trump at all, but I mean, I can't imagine that the president would come, that the president-elect would come out and tell his guys or whoever was in there with him and talking in the car ride over to the Capitol and saying, you know, maybe that Obamacare is not so bad, or you know, maybe that Iran deal is not so bad. I mean, you don't think there were any inroads made along those lines, do you?
Look, I think the role of the president-elect in a meeting like that is to, frankly, be a very polite listener.
Right.
This is the president's swan song.
Oh, no,
And
but
he's
you don't think it
entitled to
changed any
take it.
minds, do you, in the end?
No, but I do think, particularly when it comes to foreign policy, let's say the president says to Donald Trump, and I think this is likely, that let's talk about the Iran deal. And I understand you want to repeal it. Here's what you need to know. Here's the consequence of this. Here's the consequence of that. Here's what happens to the uranium that was already shipped to Russia. Here's what Russia will do. They'll put it back.
Right.
You know, it's the important key substantive facts as President Obama sees them.
Right.
That he has the unique opportunity to convey to candidate Trump and now President-elect Trump about things that likely never came up on the campaign trail because of the complicated, wonky details that presidents wrestle with, but candidates really get to gloss over.
Very interesting insight and perspective. Let me ask you, your old boss made it public that he and his wife left the president, the top of the ticket when they went to vote blank, and then voted all Republican the rest of the way. You wrote an op-ed and you said basically the same thing, that you were not going to vote for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Any regrets, and why did you do that?
No, that's my conclusion at the end of the campaign. I'm glad Hillary did not win. You know, nothing would have made me sadder on election morning to the day after to find out Hillary was our president. But, you know, for me personally, I tried as hard as I could to see things both directions, and I was for Donald Trump. And I had said that very publicly. I was one of the few Bush people to come out and say, I will vote for Donald Trump. But ultimately, it just accumulated. Some of the statements he made I just found too off-putting, too offensive, and it wore me down. And at the end of the day, I concluded that a vote for someone was one bridge too far for me. I was always against Hillary, and I'm glad she lost. But when you have to actually check the ballot and say who you are for, I just couldn't do it. And so that's why I decided to leave my ballot blank. I'm glad Hillary lost. I'm glad Trump won now. And I want Donald Trump, obviously, to be successful. And I think the combination of him with the Republican Congress, there's an awful lot of good and big things that can be done for this country now.
I agree wholeheartedly. Let me ask you about some names that have been mentioned. Newt Gingrich, Secretary of State. Rudy Giuliani, possibly as Attorney General. I don't know what role Chris Christie might play. To me, if you ask my personal opinion, they should let him stay home. What about a Giuliani and a Newt, and who might you see emerging from, you know, the spokespeople he's had that you've had chance to see, and maybe even you know, Kellyanne Conway? Who would you think would make a good press secretary?
Steve, let me give you some advice on the personnel issues. And I hated it whenever there was an opening at the White House. And I was there during the transition in 2000 and had to deal with all these issues about who will get appointed.
Right.
No one has a clue. Everybody loves to speculate, and you can never be wrong. And so you just throw it out there, and then the press says, oh, I heard it somewhere. And it's someone's being mentioned. They never say mentioned by whom.
Right.
They just say mentioned. And the only person that knows is Donald Trump and a very small coterie of people around Donald Trump. And so it's a waste of time. It's idle speculation until you know, and unless you're in Donald Trump's head or the head of the people closest to him. It is absolute guesswork by everybody. Now, the one thing that I would recommend to Donald Trump that he do is stay true to his outsider nature. He needs, and I say this as an establishment insider Republican, he needs to make sure that he is putting people into places of power who are really bona fide outsiders. He has earned the right to change that town. And he has to be careful not to listen to those people who say, you know, you've got to appoint this experienced person or that experienced person. It's contrary to a lot of conventional wisdom, but Donald Trump has been successful being contrary to conventional wisdom. And that should be, if I were advising him, the way he continues to think now.
That's very interesting, because the popular thought would be, well, he's an outsider, so he needs to surround himself with people who have been there, done that, the experts, blah, blah, blah. But you're saying not necessarily true, especially in all cases. It's
a mix. And instead of having the mix be 50-50, insider, outsider, experienced, non-experienced, I think that he should have a mix that's much closer to 80-20 outsider. You know, what happens in the White House, what happens in Washington is people keep saying to you, you know, this is how it's always been done. And the pressure starts to mount. You can't deviate.
Right.
His strength has been he deviates from these norms. And so he should also surround himself with people who know they want to change Washington. Now, there may be some people, I think Newt Gingrich fits the category of someone who's been around, who is an insider, but has always thought like an outsider. There will be several people like that, but don't fall for the insider experienced act.
Gotcha.
He's got to have his thumb on and have the right people in there to change Washington.
Ari Fleischer, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Great to be with you as well, as always.
All right, folks, and coming up next, Jack Abramoff, former D.C. lobbyist, will join us. And that was an interview that we did earlier on America Talks Live. Very interesting perspective from a man who should know. Don't go away.